Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever been someone's emotional punching bag, if you've ever been told you're worthless by someone who should have loved you, hit that like button right now. And if you know someone trapped in a narcissistic family, share this story. It might just save their life. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my revenge story. It's proof that even the most broken among us can rise from the ashes and burn down the kingdom that tried to destroy us. My name is Eli, and for 11 years, I was nothing more than a ghost haunting my own life in Augusta, Georgia. You know that massive courthouse on James Brown Boulevard? The one with the towering columns that's supposed to represent justice? I spent countless nights staring at it from my car, wondering if justice was something that only existed for people who hadn't been systematically destroyed by their own family. My father, Marcus Reed, was what the outside world would call successful. Regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, member of the Augusta Country Club, regular attendee at Sacred Heart Cultural Center charity galas. He had that kind of smile that made people trust him instantly, white teeth, firm handshake, the ability to remember everyone's name and their kid's college major. But behind the doors of our colonial home in the Hill Acres neighborhood, Marcus Reed was something else entirely. Narcissistic traits are characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance, lack of empathy, need for excessive admiration, and tendency to exploit others for personal gain. My father had all of these in spades, but he'd weaponized them into an art form. I was 19 when it started. That's when my mother died. Cancer took her in 6 months, and with her went the only buffer between my father and me. She'd been sick for so long that I dropped out of college to help care for her. After she died, I was too broken to leave, too exhausted to fight, and my father saw an opportunity. "You're nothing without this family," he told me the day after her funeral, while relatives were still bringing casseroles. "You dropped out of school, you have no job, no skills. You'd be homeless without me. Remember that." And for 11 years, he made sure I never forgot it. The abuse wasn't physical, my father was too smart for that. Physical bruises heal, leave evidence, raise questions. When a child has been conditioned to be an emotional punching bag for their parents, this dynamic feels natural and is unwittingly sought after as an adult. Instead, he specialized in what therapists call soul murder, the systematic destruction of someone's identity, self-worth, and ability to trust their own perception of reality. Every morning started the same way. He'd come downstairs in his pressed suit, pour his coffee, and begin the daily inventory of my failures. "Still in those ratty pajamas? No wonder you can't hold a job. Making eggs again? That's why you're getting fat. Though honestly, your appearance is the least of your problems. I saw the dishes from last night weren't done until 11 p.m. Were you trying to wake me up with all that noise, or are you just naturally inconsiderate?" Gaslighting is used to gain power and control, denying that something happened or acting as if real events are in a person's head. When I'd try to defend myself, point out that he'd told me to wait until after his conference call to do the dishes, he'd look at me with such genuine confusion that I'd start doubting my own memory. "I never said that. You're making things up again. Maybe you should see someone about these delusions." The financial abuse was perhaps the most insidious. When Mom died, she left me a small inheritance, about $50,000. My father convinced me to let him invest it for me, since I was too emotional and unstable to make good decisions. Within a year, he claimed the investments had failed. The money was gone. But I noticed his new BMW appeared around the same time. When I tried to get a job, he sabotaged every opportunity. He'd call my employers, claiming I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of theft, a complete lie, that he was concerned for their safety. 3 jobs lost in 6 months. Eventually, word got around Augusta's business community, I was unemployable. "See," he'd say, shaking his head sadly. "I told you that you can't function in the real world. You're lucky you have me." Manipulation tactics such as blaming, disrespect, and gaslighting are commonly utilized in narcissistic families to further the control of the narcissistic individual. My father had turned our home into a psychological prison, and I was both the prisoner and the guard, too broken to realize the door was unlocked. But here's the thing about narcissists, they're so convinced of their own superiority, so certain that everyone else is beneath them, that they get sloppy. They don't think the inferior people around them are smart enough to document their abuse. They don't imagine their victims might be building a case. They don't realize that sometimes, the person they've designated as the family scapegoat is actually taking notes. My grandfather, William Reed, was nothing like his son. Where Marcus was cruel, William was kind. Where Marcus was narcissistic, William was empathetic. And where Marcus saw me as worthless, William saw potential being systematically destroyed. Grandpa Will lived in a modest apartment in Martinez, just across the river from Augusta. He'd been a contractor his whole life, building houses with his own hands, saving every penny. Marcus barely visited him, considered him embarrassing, a blue-collar embarrassment to his white-collar image. But I visited. Every Sunday, while Marcus played golf, I'd drive to Martinez and spend the afternoon with Grandpa Will. Those Sundays were my only respite, my only reminder that I was a person worthy of love and respect. "Your father wasn't always like this," Grandpa Will told me one Sunday, about 3 years into my imprisonment. We were sitting on his small balcony, watching the Savannah River flow by. Something broke in him when he was young. Maybe it was my fault, working too much, not being around enough. But that doesn't excuse what he's doing to you. You know? I asked, shocked. I'd been so careful to hide the abuse, so convinced that no one would believe me. "I have eyes, kid. I see how you flinch when he speaks. I see how you've dimmed since your mother passed. And I see how he's keeping you trapped." That's when Grandpa Will told me his secret. "I've been saving money my whole life," he said, his weathered hands gripping his coffee mug. "Not in banks, never trusted them after the depression stories my parents told. I've got properties, kid. Rental houses all over Augusta and Martinez. Your father doesn't know about most of them, he never cared enough to ask about his old man's business." My heart was pounding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when I die, it's all going to you. Not him. You. It's all in the will, ironclad, with a law firm in Atlanta managing it so he can't contest it. There's about $3.6 million in assets, maybe more depending on the market." I couldn't breathe. $3.6 million. Freedom. Escape. A life. "But," Grandpa Will continued, "I need you to promise me something. Don't let him know. Not a word. He'll destroy you if he finds out. And document everything he does to you. Everything. You'll need it someday." That night, I started my documentation. Every insult, recorded on my phone hidden in my pocket. Every financial manipulation, photographed and backed up to a cloud account Marcus didn't know about. Every gaslighting attempt, written down with dates and times. Keeping a meticulous record of all interactions with the narcissist is crucial, including emails, text messages, and any communication that highlights their behavior. For 5 more years, I documented everything while waiting. Grandpa Will's health was declining, and we both knew time was running out. He'd given me a purpose, a reason to endure. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building a case. The documentation revealed patterns I hadn't even noticed while living through it. 1,847 recorded instances of verbal abuse. 234 attempts at gaslighting, making me question my reality. 89 incidents of financial manipulation or control. 412 times he'd publicly humiliated me in front of others. 67 job opportunities sabotaged through his interference. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Marcus himself. My father, in his arrogance, had been sending emails to his lawyer friend, bragging about how he'd broken me, how he'd turned me into his personal servant, how he'd stolen my inheritance from Mom and made me believe it was lost in the market. He thought his emails were private, protected by attorney-client privilege. He was wrong. His friend wasn't representing him in any legal matter, which meant no privilege existed. And when you share your Wi-Fi password with your worthless child to run all your smart home devices, you shouldn't be surprised when they document your digital footprint. Children of narcissists endure severe psychological maltreatment through bullying, terrorizing, coercive control, leading to symptoms similar to physical or sexual abuse including PTSD, depression, and suicidality. Every day, I fought these demons, kept alive only by the promise of eventual freedom. Grandpa Will died on a Tuesday in March. It was quiet, peaceful, everything his son wasn't. His last words to me were, "Make him face what he is." The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Marcus didn't even plan to attend until the lawyer called and specifically requested his presence. I'll never forget his face when the lawyer read the will. To my grandson, Eli Reed, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $3.6 million after taxes and fees. The lawyer's words hung in the air of that downtown Augusta office like a bomb about to detonate. I kept my face carefully neutral, but inside, my heart was trying to escape through my chest. Marcus's face went through a spectacular transformation: confusion, disbelief, rage, and finally, a cold calculation that I knew meant danger. "There must be some mistake," he said, his salesman smile plastered on but not reaching his eyes. "My father wasn't of sound mind. I'm his son. This will needs to be contested." The lawyer, Mr. Harrison from Harrison and Associates, was prepared for this. "Mr. Reed, your father was examined by 3 separate physicians in the months before his death, all confirming his mental competency. Additionally, he recorded a video statement explaining his decision, which I'm authorized to play if you wish to contest." "Play it," Marcus demanded. Grandpa Will appeared on the screen, looking directly at the camera, his eyes clear and determined. "If you're watching this, Marcus, it means you're trying to steal from Eli what I freely gave. I know what you've done to that kid. I know about the stolen inheritance from their mother. I know about the jobs you've sabotaged. I know about the systematic abuse you've subjected them to for over a decade. I've documented everything, and so has Eli. This inheritance is my way of righting the wrongs you've committed. Don't make this worse for yourself by fighting it." The rage in Marcus's eyes was volcanic, but his voice remained controlled. "We'll discuss this at home, Eli." That ride home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Marcus drove in complete silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I knew this was the calm before the storm. The storm came the moment we walked through the door. "You manipulative little leech," he roared, his mask finally completely off. "You turned my own father against me. 11 years I've housed you, fed you, kept you from being homeless, and this is how you repay me? The feelings that make us human are selfish and must be repressed. Only the narcissist has free rein to express feelings and emotional reactions." But for the first time in 11 years, I didn't stay silent. "You stole my mother's inheritance. You sabotaged my jobs. You've kept me prisoner in this house while telling everyone I'm mentally unstable. Grandpa Will saw through you." The backhand came fast, splitting my lip. The first and only time he'd ever hit me physically. And the last mistake he'd ever make. "That money is mine," he snarled. "You're going to sign it all over to me, or I'll make your life so miserable you'll beg me to let you die." That's when I smiled. Blood on my teeth, years of rage finally finding its voice, I smiled. "No." 1 word. 2 letters. 11 years in the making. The next 3 days were hell. Marcus pulled out every manipulation tactic in his arsenal. He cried, claiming I was destroying the family. He threatened to throw me out. He love-bombed me, promising to be better, to get therapy, to change. He called relatives, telling them I'd stolen from him, that I was mentally ill, that I was dangerous. But I had my inheritance now. I had power. And I had a plan. On day 4, I served him with an eviction notice. Yes, eviction. See, in his arrogance, Marcus had never put my name on any household bills, never acknowledged me as a tenant, never created any paper trail that I lived there. Legally, I was a guest who had overstayed their welcome. But the house was in both my parents' names, and when Mom died, her half should have gone to me. Marcus had forged documents to transfer it fully to himself. I knew this because I'd hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator with Grandpa Will's money. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, I told him, handing him the legal documents. Mom's half of this house is mine. You can either buy me out at market value, $287,000, or we can force a sale. His face turned purple. You can't do this. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what you really are. What I really am, I said calmly, is someone with 11 years of documented abuse, including your own written admissions of financial fraud. Would you like to see the compilation video I've made? It's already uploaded to a private server, ready to be released if anything happens to me. That night, the real breaking point came. Marcus had called a family meeting, his brother Tom, sister Patricia, and various cousins and family friends, about 20 people total, all gathered in our living room. He was going to publicly destroy me, turn the entire family against me before I could expose him. I've called you all here because I'm concerned about Eli, he began, using his best concerned father voice. As you know, they've struggled with mental health issues since their mother's death. Now they've manipulated my poor father into leaving them money, and they're trying to steal my house. The room was full of sympathetic murmurs. These people had known Marcus for years. They trusted him. Believed him. Each role serves the needs of the narcissist. Roles are determined by what the parent needs the children to be at a particular time. I had been assigned the role of the crazy, unstable child, and everyone had accepted it without question. That's not true, I said quietly. Marcus's smile was predatory. See? This is what I deal with. The constant lies, the manipulation. I've tried so hard to help them, but... I have recordings, I interrupted. The room went silent. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the Bluetooth speaker Marcus loved to use for his dinner parties, and hit play. Marcus's voice filled the room, "You're nothing but a worthless parasite. I should have had you committed years ago. Maybe I still will. Who would believe you over me?" Then another, "That money your mother left you? I invested it all right, invested it in my new car. You're too stupid to manage money anyway." And another, "I called your boss today, told him about your history of theft. You won't be working there anymore. You can't survive without me, and I'll make sure of that." The room was tomb silent except for the recordings. Marcus's family members' faces went from sympathy to horror to disgust as recording after recording played. 11 years of abuse condensed into a devastating 20-minute presentation. Patricia was the first to speak. "Marcus, is this really you?" "It's taken out of context," he spluttered. "They're manipulating the recordings. This is what I mean about their mental illness." I played the video from 3 weeks ago. Marcus, drunk at his home office, on a video call with his lawyer friend, laughing about how he'd broken his pathetic child like training a dog. Tom stood up. "I've heard enough. Marcus, you're a monster." One by one, they left. His carefully constructed image, the successful businessman, the devoted father caring for his troubled child, it crumbled in real time. The public humiliation at the family meeting was just the beginning. Marcus thought he could weather the storm, convince people I'd manipulated the recordings, that I was the real villain. He still had his job, his country club membership, his reputation in the wider Augusta community. He underestimated me. More importantly, he underestimated the power of truth in the age of social media. Narcissists are crafty manipulators whose tactics in court involve making themselves appear as the victim. The psychology is to gain sympathy or deflect attention from their misconduct. But I wasn't going to let him play the victim this time. I created a website, The Truth About Marcus Reed. Not his real name, of course, I'm not stupid enough to put his actual identity in this story. But the website was real, and it was devastating. Every recording, every email, every piece of evidence, organized chronologically. 11 years of abuse laid out like a court case. But the masterpiece was the video compilation, security footage from our home, cameras he'd installed to keep us safe, showing him screaming at me, throwing things, his face contorted in rage while I sat silent, taking it. I didn't publish it publicly. Not yet. Instead, I sent the link to 5 people: his boss, the president of his country club, his pastor, his 2 biggest clients, and the woman he'd been dating for the past 6 months. Yeah, he'd been dating while telling everyone he was too busy caring for his mentally ill child to have a social life. The email was simple. This is who Marcus Reed really is. The recordings are real. The emails are unedited. The security footage is from his own cameras. Do with this information what you will. Within 48 hours, Marcus's life began imploding. His boss called him in for a meeting. The pharmaceutical company couldn't have a regional sales director who admitted on recording to theft and fraud, even if it was just from his own child. They offered him a choice: resign quietly with a small severance, or be fired publicly for conduct unbecoming a company representative. The country club was less kind. They simply revoked his membership, citing their morality clause. The same country club where he'd spent decades building his network, where he'd hosted clients, where he'd felt like a king. His girlfriend blocked him on everything and told her friends why. Within days, every eligible woman in Augusta's social circuit knew Marcus Reed was an abuser. But the crushing blow came from an unexpected source. One of his clients, Mrs. Harrison, was a prominent attorney specializing in elder abuse and financial fraud. She didn't just drop him as a client, she contacted me. "Eli," she said when we met at a coffee shop on Broad Street, "what your father did to you, the financial manipulation, the isolation, the systematic abuse, it's not just morally wrong. It's criminal. Have you considered pressing charges?" I hadn't. I'd been so focused on survival, then on escape, that I'd never thought about actual legal consequences. "The theft of your mother's inheritance alone is grand larceny," she continued. "The job interference could be considered tortious interference. The 11 years of documented psychological abuse, especially with the financial component, could qualify for both civil and criminal charges. I'd like to represent you, pro bono." Emotional and psychological abuse are recognized forms of child maltreatment. If proven in court, it may impact custody and legal decisions, though proving it can be challenging due to its subtle nature. Pro bono. Free. Because she'd seen the website and was so disgusted by what Marcus had done that she wanted to help. The civil lawsuit was filed within a week. We weren't just suing for the stolen inheritance, we were suing for the $50,000 stolen inheritance plus interest. Lost wages from 89 documented instances of job interference, estimated at $400,000 over 11 years. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. False imprisonment, psychological. Defamation. Fraud. The total? $2.3 million. Marcus hired a lawyer, of course. A good one. But even the best lawyer can't defend against 11 years of meticulously documented evidence, especially when the defendant was arrogant enough to put much of it in writing. The criminal charges came next. The district attorney's office, after reviewing the evidence, charged Marcus with grand larceny, the stolen inheritance, fraud, harassment, making false reports, all those calls to my employers. The local news picked up the story. Augusta business leader charged with decade-long abuse of adult child. The article was picked up by regional papers, then national ones. Someone created a TikTok about it that went viral, 49 million views of a young woman reading excerpts from the website with tears streaming down her face, saying this could have been me. This was me. Stories about refusing to be the family punching bag have resonated on social media, with people sharing their experiences of breaking free. Marcus tried to fight back. He created his own website claiming I was a mentally ill manipulator who had turned his family against him. He went on local radio to plead his case. He even tried to get a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing him. The judge denied it in less than 5 minutes after reviewing the evidence. The trial date was set for September 15 at the Augusta Richmond County Judicial Center on James Brown Boulevard, the same courthouse I used to stare at, wondering if justice existed. Marcus had spent the months leading up to the trial trying to salvage his reputation. He joined a new church, started therapy, which he broadcast to anyone who would listen, and even tried to reconcile with family members. Some believed him. Most didn't. Working with an attorney familiar with narcissistic tactics is key for efficiently representing your interests in court and ensuring your case is presented optimally. Mrs. Harrison was exactly that attorney. She'd seen every narcissistic trick in the book and was prepared for all of them. The morning of the trial, I wore my mother's favorite color, deep purple. It felt like having her with me. Marcus wore his most expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the successful businessman he'd once been. The courtroom was packed. Family members, former colleagues of Marcus's, reporters, and dozens of people who'd been following the case on social media. The bailiff had to turn people away. Marcus's attorney, Mr. Richardson, tried every strategy. The mental illness defense: my client was dealing with an adult child with severe mental health issues. Any harsh words were born of frustration and concern. Mrs. Harrison destroyed this with medical records showing I'd never been diagnosed with any mental illness, had never been hospitalized, had never even been prescribed psychiatric medication. The only therapy I'd received was after escaping Marcus. The loving father defense: Marcus Reed housed and fed the plaintiff for 11 years after they dropped out of college. This is not the action of an abuser. Mrs. Harrison presented the evidence of financial manipulation, showing how Marcus had systematically made me dependent on him, sabotaging every attempt at independence. The taken out of context defense: these recordings were selectively edited to paint my client in the worst possible light. We played the full, unedited recordings. Hours of them. Several jury members were visibly crying by the end. But the moment that sealed Marcus's fate came when he took the stand. Narcissists exhibit a pattern of grandstanding, perjury, vindictiveness, and chaotic inconsistencies in their testimonies. Marcus couldn't help himself. When Mrs. Harrison questioned him about the stolen inheritance, his mask slipped. "That money was mine," he burst out. "I was her husband. Eli was nothing but a burden, a failure who couldn't even finish college. Why should they get anything?" The courtroom gasped. His own attorney put his head in his hands. Mrs. Harrison smiled coldly. "So you admit you took the money?" Marcus tried to backtrack, but it was too late. In his rage, he'd confessed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The civil trial was even more devastating for Marcus. The jury awarded me everything we'd asked for and more. $50,000 stolen inheritance plus 11 years of interest, $78,000. Lost wages, $400,000. Emotional distress, $1,500,000. Punitive damages, $500,000. Legal fees, $47,000. Total, $2,525,000. Marcus's assets were frozen. His house, my mother's house, was transferred to me. His retirement accounts were liquidated. His BMW was sold. Everything he'd built on the foundation of my suffering was stripped away. But the criminal sentencing was where true justice was served. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Williams, was known for being tough but fair. She'd reviewed all the evidence, watched all the recordings, read all the emails. "Mr. Reed," she said, looking directly at him, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated, sustained campaign of psychological torture. You didn't just abuse your child, you systematically destroyed their life for over a decade, all while maintaining a facade of respectability in this community." She continued, "You've shown no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Even now, you see yourself as the victim. This is the hallmark of someone who will continue to harm others if given the chance." The sentence, 8 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 5. Marcus's face went white. His attorney had told him to expect probation, maybe a few months in county jail. Not this. As they led him away in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. The rage was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in his eyes before: fear. Marcus's imprisonment sent shockwaves through Augusta's business community. People who'd worked with him for years questioned how they'd missed the signs. His company conducted an internal review of all his business dealings. 3 more cases of fraud were uncovered: clients he'd overcharged, expenses he'd falsified. But the real ripple effect came from the publicity around the case. The TikTok about our story had evolved into a movement. #NoMorePunchingBag became a rallying cry for abuse survivors. Support groups formed online and in person. People shared their own stories of narcissistic abuse, financial manipulation, and family trauma. I received thousands of messages from survivors. "Your story gave me the courage to document my mom's abuse. I thought I was alone. I thought I was crazy. Thank you for showing me I'm not. I'm 47 years old and just now realizing my father is a narcissist because of your website." Research shows family members of narcissists may feel intense anxiety about keeping the parent happy, often becoming codependent and giving up their own autonomy. These messages showed how widespread this trauma was. Dr. Sarah Chan, a psychology professor at Augusta University, reached out to me about participating in a study on narcissistic abuse recovery. The study, published in the Journal of Trauma Psychology, followed 50 survivors of long-term narcissistic abuse. The findings were groundbreaking. 90% showed symptoms of complex PTSD. 78% had been financially manipulated. 82% experienced job or education sabotage. 95% were told they were crazy or too sensitive. 100% reported that documentation was crucial to their escape. The study led to new treatment protocols for therapists dealing with narcissistic abuse survivors. My story, my documentation, became a template for others seeking freedom. Marcus's family had their own reckoning. His brother Tom reached out to apologize. "We saw the signs, Eli. We just didn't want to believe them. It was easier to think you were troubled than to accept Marcus was an abuser. I'm sorry. We failed you." Patricia went further. She started a support group for family members of narcissists, helping them recognize the signs and support victims. The group met monthly at the Sacred Heart Cultural Center, the same place Marcus had once attended charity galas. His ex-girlfriend, Rebecca, became an advocate too. She wrote a blog post that went viral: "I dated a narcissist and didn't know it, red flags I missed." She detailed how charming Marcus had been, how he'd love-bombed her, how he'd already started the devaluation process before the truth came out. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. Or rather, building for the first time. With the inheritance from Grandpa Will and the settlement money, I had $5.2 million. But money doesn't heal trauma. I spent the first year in intensive therapy, working through the complex PTSD, learning to trust my own perceptions again, discovering who I was outside of the abuse. Setting boundaries with narcissistic parents is crucial for healing. As a child you were trapped, but as an adult you have the power to walk away, set boundaries, and seek help. I went back to college, finishing my degree in psychology with a focus on trauma counseling. The professors were fascinated by my case, often asking me to share my experiences with the class. I became the expert on narcissistic abuse through lived experience. The house, my mother's house, was completely renovated. Every trace of Marcus was removed. The home office where he'd plotted my destruction became a library. The dining room where he'd held court, humiliating me in front of guests, became an art studio. I was reclaiming every space he'd poisoned. But the most satisfying transformation was the living room where he'd tried to destroy me in front of the family. That became the meeting space for a support group I started, Survivors of Narcissistic Abuse, Augusta Chapter. Every Tuesday, 15 to 20 people would gather to share their stories, support each other, and heal together. One Tuesday, about 6 months after the trial, a familiar face appeared at the meeting: Marcus's mother, my grandmother, Eleanor. She was 82 years old, distinguished, and crying. "I need to understand," she said to the group. "How did my son become this? What did I do wrong?" The group was silent. Then I spoke. "Sometimes, Eleanor, it's not about what you did wrong. A narcissist is a person without empathy, but they are also defined by their complete lack of self-esteem. Sometimes people break in ways we can't fix, and they choose to break others instead of healing themselves." She stayed for the entire meeting, listening to story after story of narcissistic abuse. At the end, she approached me. "I put money in his commissary account. Should I stop?" "That's your choice," I told her. "But remember, he's there because of what he chose to do, not because of what was done to him." She nodded, understanding. The next week, she came back to the group. And the week after that. She became one of our most dedicated members, working through her own trauma of raising a narcissist, the guilt, the questions that would never have answers. 3 years have passed since Marcus was sentenced. 3 years of healing, growing, and building a life I never thought possible. I graduated summa cum laude with my psychology degree. The graduation ceremony was held at the James Brown Arena, and as I walked across that stage, I thought about all the nights I'd stared at the courthouse, wondering if justice existed. It does, but sometimes you have to create it yourself. My therapy practice, Phoenix Rising Counseling, specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery. I see 30 clients a week, all survivors of various forms of narcissistic abuse. The waiting list is 3 months long. I charge on a sliding scale. Those who can afford it pay full price, subsidizing free treatment for those who can't. Grandpa would have been proud. The practice operates out of a beautiful Victorian house on Green Street, walking distance from the Augusta Museum of History. I bought it with part of the settlement money, renovating it into a warm, welcoming space, the opposite of the cold, controlling environment I'd survived. My book, The Documentation Diaries, Surviving and Escaping Narcissistic Abuse, hit the New York Times bestseller list last month. All proceeds go to a foundation I established, the William Reed Foundation for Abuse Survivors, named after Grandpa Will, of course. The foundation has helped 147 people escape abusive situations, providing emergency housing, legal assistance, and therapy. Courts prioritize the well-being of children, and access to support services like counseling can provide crucial emotional support during difficult times. The foundation ensures survivors have these resources. I've testified before the Georgia State Legislature about the need for better laws protecting adult victims of family abuse. A bill inspired by my case, the Coercive Control Act, is currently in committee. It would make systematic psychological and financial abuse a specific crime, with enhanced penalties when the victim is made dependent on their abuser. But perhaps the most meaningful work I do is the correspondence program with current victims. Every week, I receive dozens of letters from people still trapped in narcissistic abuse situations. I respond to every one, providing resources, validation, and most importantly, hope. One letter particularly moved me, from a 34-year-old woman in Texas. Dear Eli, I've been documenting for 6 months now, just like you taught in your book. 237 recordings, 459 photos, 1,832 screenshots. My husband doesn't know. My escape fund has $3,400, enough for a deposit on an apartment and a month of expenses. Next month, I leave. Your story saved my life. I was going to kill myself before I found your website. Now I know I'm not crazy. Now I know I can survive this. Thank you. These letters keep me going on the hard days, and yes, there are still hard days. Releasing anger from narcissistic abuse isn't something that happens quickly. Survivors may vacillate between resentment, guilt, and forgiveness for months or years, feeling like rage is bottomless. Some days, the trauma feels fresh. Some days, I still hear Marcus's voice telling me I'm worthless. Some days, I have to check my recordings to remind myself that yes, it really was that bad, and no, I'm not exaggerating. But those days are getting fewer and farther between. Marcus, meanwhile, is still in prison. He's been denied parole twice. Apparently, he keeps insisting he's the victim, showing no remorse or understanding of his crimes. His prison counselor reached out to me last year, asking if I'd be willing to participate in a restorative justice program, to meet with Marcus so he could apologize. I declined. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. He writes me letters sometimes. I don't read them, they go straight to my attorney, who files them in case we need restraining orders when he's released. But I know from the prison officials that they follow a pattern: rage, self-pity, manipulation, fake apologies, more rage. The cycle of a narcissist who's lost control of their victim. His flying monkeys, the people who still believe his version of events, occasionally try to contact me. He's changed, they say. He's suffering, they plead. Family is family, they insist. Narcissists will be narcissists, those trying to deal with them are frayed, troubled, sleepless, but the narcissists themselves are not. I know Marcus isn't suffering the way they think. In his mind, he's still the victim, still the hero of his own story. My response is always the same: he's experiencing consequences, not suffering. There's a difference. The Augusta community has largely embraced me. I give talks at Augusta University, lead workshops at the Augusta Public Library, and volunteer with domestic violence shelters. The girl who was once unemployable is now a respected member of the community. Last month, I was invited to speak at a conference in Atlanta, Breaking the Silence: Narcissistic Abuse in the Digital Age. The keynote was delivered by Dr. Ramani Durvasula, one of the world's leading experts on narcissistic abuse. After my presentation, she approached me. "Your documentation protocol has revolutionized how we teach victims to protect themselves. You've saved lives, Eli. Never doubt that." As I stood on that stage in Atlanta, looking out at 500 survivors and advocates, I thought about the person I'd been 5 years ago: broken, convinced I was worthless, certain I'd die in that house. That person was gone. In their place stood someone who'd walked through hell and emerged, not just survived, but thriving. I wrote Marcus a letter last week. Not to send, I'll never send it, but for closure. For me. Marcus, you were right about one thing: I was nothing. You made sure of that. For 11 years, you systematically destroyed everything I was, everything I could have been. You took my inheritance, my jobs, my self-worth, my sanity, my hope. You turned me into nothing. But here's what you never understood about nothing: it's the perfect foundation for everything. From nothing, I built documentation that destroyed you. From nothing, I built a legal case that took everything you had. From nothing, I built a support system that caught me when I fell. From nothing, I built a career helping others escape their own narcissistic hells. From nothing, I built a life you could never have imagined for me. You created nothing, and from that nothing, I created everything. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? Your greatest success, breaking me completely, became your complete destruction. Every cruel word you spoke, every job you sabotaged, every gaslighting attempt, every moment you tried to convince me I was worthless, it all became evidence. Your weapons became my ammunition. Some golden children become narcissists themselves if they don't understand the dynamics and work through recovery. You could have chosen recovery. You could have chosen to break the cycle. Instead, you chose to perfect it, to weaponize it, to glory in it. And now you sit in a cell, while I sit in my office, helping your other victims, because yes, I found them. Your ex-employees who you bullied into breakdowns. Your college girlfriend who still has nightmares about you. Your business partners who you defrauded. They all found me, and I helped them heal. Your legacy isn't the successful businessman you pretended to be. It's not the respected community leader you played at being. Your legacy is as a cautionary tale, a textbook example of narcissistic personality disorder, a guide for what to document when escaping an abuser. Students study your case in abnormal psychology classes. Lawyers reference it in domestic abuse trials. Therapists use it to validate their clients' experiences. Survivors read it and find hope. You wanted to be important, to be remembered, to matter. Congratulations, you are. Just not how you planned. Grandpa will saw you clearly. Mom probably did too, in her final days when the medication lifted the veil of your manipulation. They both loved me in ways you're not capable of understanding. That love, even from beyond death, saved me. I won't pretend I've forgiven you. Forgiveness would require you to acknowledge what you've done, to show genuine remorse, to change. You're not capable of any of those things. But I've released you. You're no longer the voice in my head telling me I'm worthless. You're no longer the shadow that makes me question reality. You're no longer anything to me but a chapter in my story, an important chapter that shaped who I became, but still just a chapter. The next chapters are being written without you. I help people now. Every week, dozens of survivors sit in the chairs in my office, in the support group in Mom's house, in the workshops I lead, and they heal. They cry, they rage, they discover they're not crazy, they learn to trust themselves again. They rise from their own nothing. That's my revenge, Marcus. Not your imprisonment, though that's satisfying. Not the money, though it's useful. Not even the public humiliation, though it was necessary. My revenge is that I became everything you said I couldn't be. My revenge is that your abuse made me strong enough to help others escape theirs. My revenge is that I took your worst weapon, making me nothing, and turned it into my greatest strength. My revenge is that I won. Not through manipulation or abuse or control, but through truth. Simple, documented, undeniable truth. You have 2 years left on your sentence, assuming you make parole this time. When you get out, you'll be a registered felon, unemployable in any position of trust, banned from contacting me, and unwelcome in the community you once ruled. You'll discover what it's really like to be nothing, not the orchestrated nothingness you imposed on me, but the genuine nothingness of a person who destroyed every relationship, every opportunity, every chance at redemption. I wonder if you'll learn from it. Statistics say you won't. Narcissists rarely change, especially those diagnosed late in life. You'll probably find new victims, though I've made sure your name and face are well known in the survivor community. Good luck with that. This is the last letter I'll ever write to you, even unsent. After this, you become what you always should have been to me, a stranger whose DNA I happen to share. I'm done giving you space in my head, my heart, my story. This is where your chapter ends and mine truly begins. The child you tried to destroy. I burned the letter in my backyard, watching the smoke rise into the Augusta sky. As the last of the paper turned to ash, my phone buzzed. A new client, referred by Mrs. Harrison. Another survivor ready to document, to escape, to rise. I smiled, went inside, and prepared for our first session. The cycle of abuse stops here. One survivor, one story, one documentation file at a time. Because here's what I learned in those 11 years of hell and these 3 years of healing: narcissists think they're gods, untouchable and all-powerful. But they're wrong. They're just broken people who chose to break others instead of healing themselves. And when their victims find their voices, document their truth, and refuse to be nothing anymore, that's when the real story begins. If you're reading this and recognizing your own story, know this: you're not crazy. You're not worthless. You're not alone. Document everything. Build your escape plan. Reach out for help. And remember, from nothing, you can build everything. Your story matters. Your pain is real. Your escape is possible. Rise.